you. Thank you for jumping on. Okay, well, my name is Jordan. I'm born and raised in Orem, and I did summer sales before jumping into real estate. And in 2018, got my license and started here with KW in January 2018. So it's just been 5.5 years, and never considered going anywhere else, just because I feel like the first part I joined Keller Williams for was because of all the training and, you know, the kind of the cohesive, like I could go talk to anybody here and they'll give me pointers, right? Any of the agents here are very willing to share and very open to share. They have this mentality that there's enough to go around. And so as much as we're kind of competition, we also are here to help each other out. And so I've appreciated that. And then of course the money, right? Once you do more than 7 or 8 sales a year, or planning on doing that, then this is one of the least expensive brokerages out there. So plus being as big as they are, it's really awesome to be able to go to like mega camp or family reunion, or just participate in any of those online trainings that they have that talk about the market. And, you know, they're kind of the forefront. They have they pour so much money into data, into technology, into these different things that can help us be successful, that I've just been very happy with Keller Williams. So drink from the Kool-Aid. That's my advice, because there's a lot of it and a lot of good stuff. And to be honest, my first few years, I didn't really plug into Keller Williams as much as I did in the past couple. And I've just been like, man, kicking myself, because if I had done more of these classes or gone to mega camp and those kinds of things before, who knows where my business would be by now. But very grateful for where it is. But yeah, that's my advice. Drink the Kool-Aid. Any questions right off the bat for me before we jump into making and receiving offers? Okay, sweet. Well, let's dive in. I, by the way, have to leave at 11 o'clock. So if you guys can help me stay on track. Okay. Yeah, hard stop at 11 o'clock. Happy to share my number with you. If you guys have questions and stuff afterwards, that I'd be happy to share about this or about anything else real estate related. So just let me know. Okay. Love the Y4C2Ts. If you haven't read through these are good principles to live by, specifically as a real estate agent. So great things here, but we're going to skip that for now. Okay. Bryce, would you mind reading that for us?
Yeah. Some of the best agents I know love nothing more than a difficult negotiation that gives them a chance to really shine, to acknowledge objections, to discover a solution with which both sides can be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many people are afraid of negotiating, right? Especially on a big deal like this. And so that's one of the main reasons why people hire us as agents, is because they don't feel comfortable with negotiating, right? So this can be an area where we can really shine, as Gary says, if we can be experienced with it, and we can have that confidence that that's what we're here for, is to help them negotiate. So does that mean that only your party will win?
Nope.
We go, if I can do this. Yeah, if we go back to this, the very top principle for our belief system is a win-win or no deal. That means that even though we're representing our buyer or our seller, that we want the other side to win too. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is just being a good person, right? But it goes deeper than that. It's also because if you create a win-lose, there's a really good chance that won't go all the way to the end, right? At some point, it's going to fall through, and then that's going to create a worse situation for your client. Yeah. So you got to make sure both sides are as happy as possible, given the circumstances. So, okay. So here's today's agenda. We're going to go through the offer process. We are going to talk about preparing an offer if you are representing a buyer. Then we're going to talk about writing that offer. And then we're going to talk about presenting the offer if you're representing a seller and receiving and responding. So we're going to talk about buyer, then seller. Okay. So overall, there's really 3 outcomes that come from a potential offer. If a buyer sends in an offer, what could the seller potentially do? What are the 3 options?
Counter, accept, and reject.
Yeah, they could counter, accept, and reject. Now, unless you're receiving more than one offer, you most likely shouldn't be rejecting offers, right? You could at least counter. If it's not what you want, that's fine, but you can at least counter. So accepting and counter are both the options, but does that mean that once the offer is accepted, that negotiating is done?
No.
When else might we see negotiations happen throughout the process?
So, yeah, what I was gonna say, being new to this industry, I'd imagine just it's accepted. Are we talking like a contract or a
Yeah.
verbal or?
No, a physical contract,
Okay.
so the buyers sent it in, the sellers accepted it just as they had it. So that means negotiations are done.
No, because is that just saying that they, like guaranteed to be able to buy the house or sign the agreement, but it's not like a formal, like, they're not necessarily bought in all the way, is what I'm saying.
So it is formal
Yeah.
and they are bought in,
Mhm.
but what might happen later on in the contract that has need for negotiation?
Inspection, if they.
There you go. Yeah. So the due diligence period is the first one that really comes up. I mean, there's the seller's disclosures, but most often there's not really any negotiating with that. But the due diligence, when the buyer sends in their home inspector and the home inspector comes back with a giant report of all the problems with the house, right? How often do you think there's a report that comes back that says that this house is perfectly clean?
Never.
Never in the history of anything, right? The inspector's job is to find the problems, even on new construction. I've had clients that have hired a home inspector and they found some issues that they were able to get the seller or the builder to resolve. But yeah, there's going to be some issues. So that's a potential area for negotiations. Anything else?
Like the move-in date or?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? And that's part of the initial offer, but that could be changed after closing dates and possession deadlines.
They ever change like what, or negotiate what's going to actually come with the property?
Yep, absolutely, all the time. Yep, exclusions and inclusions is a common one. Yep. Another deadline that happens throughout the process is the financing and appraisal deadline. So potentially if the appraisal comes in at an amount that's lower than what you've offered, there's room for more negotiation at that point too.
Mhm.
So getting under contract is a huge step, but you're not there yet. There's still a lot that has to happen in order to get that to the end. And so although it should be celebrated, I also don't want to over celebrate it with my clients. So just as a habit for me, and you guys can do whatever you want. And that's what I like these Ignite classes is you get to hear from my experience today and what I do for my process, but then you'll hear from somebody else that may be totally different. And that's great. You just kind of pick and choose what you feel like you want to incorporate into your own business. But one of the things that I do is as soon as a client goes under contract, whether it's buyer or seller, I'll send them like either crumble cookies or cupcakes or something like that, some sort of treat to let them know, hey, congrats, this is a big step, right? I also, in that note that I'm able to write as sending a gift, right? I say something along the lines, although this is not the end or something like that, like we've still got a ways to go. This is a huge step in getting there. So congrats. It's exciting, right?
Yeah, I think framing that for them, their expectations is really good because it can throw them off, like you said, financing is an issue, or if there's all these issues. The price, once again, has to either go up or, whatever it may be. I think that's good.
Yeah, and I hate to give a percentage point or a percentage, like a blanket statement for all, if you pass this deadline, this is how often it closes. But I do often give that to my clients as we progress, based on the situation. And there's so many factors that it's hard to just sit here and tell you all the different reasons, but you'll start to get familiar with how likely something may be to close, depending on their financial situation, depending on what the offer looked like, the timing of closing, when the earnest money becomes non-refundable and all that stuff. And so you can kind of give a heads up to your seller, like, hey, at this point, I would say we're 50% chance of closing. Then maybe later at this point, I think we're about 75% chance of closing. You don't have to say that, but but you totally could.
So when is you're probably gonna answer this anyways, when is the point of no return where you're
Yeah.
gonna get to it?
There is not. The point of no return is when you sign the papers to close. I guess, so there is a point of no return.
Right.
I have had one deal cancel after the financing and appraisal deadline in my past 5.5 years. Only one. And I was representing the buyer in that situation. And most of the time, your earnest money becomes non-refundable at the financing and appraisal deadline. There was a time where it became non-refundable within 24 hours of accepting the contract.
Yeah.
That was kind of a crazy COVID time. You've probably heard about those times. But I don't think we're going to expect anything like that, at least not to be the norm, right? Maybe a one-off chance house, you might get that, but for the most part, financing appraisal deadline is when all of the buyer's earnest money becomes non-refundable. So if they cancel after that point, they lose it. And so most often they're not going to cancel after that point, right? So that's why those, I guess if we did put a percentage on that one overall, it'd probably be 95% chance. Like I said, in my 5 years of doing this, I've had one that canceled, and it was actually during COVID, at the very beginning of COVID, when a buyer freaked out because all the reports in March of 2020 were saying market is about to tank. Don't buy, don't do anything. Just wait a couple months, and then suddenly the prices are going to drop 50% or whatever. Had a buyer, he sent me this article that some genius wrote that he trusted, and you know, if you followed what happened during that time, it actually did the opposite. Home prices were going like this, and then in March of 2020 in April, it flattened for a second, and then all of a sudden June, it went up way higher. And that's how it was for many months after that. So what's crazy in retrospect, that buyer canceled, and they were under contract to buy a property for $300,000, a single family home in Lehigh, which is insane to even think about. And sorry, they were under contract for 320, but when they decided to cancel, the seller said they were going to buy another house and they had to close on this one in order to get that one. And so they were end up willing to drop the price 20 grand at the last minute. And the buyer still said no, and they walked away. And the buyer lost $8,000 of earnest money because he's like, yeah, I'd rather lose $8,000 than potentially more. We tried to explain to him, you don't lose money in real estate until what?
Foreclosure or, you know.
Potentially foreclosure,
Not even
right?
that.
But most often you don't lose money in real estate unless you sell when your home is worth less than what you owe,
Yeah.
right? Or what you bought it from, depending on how you want to look at it. But regardless, if you keep that home long enough, it's going to go back up. It's just a matter of time. I can't promise you it'll go back up in a year. Can't promise it'll be 2 or 3 years, but most of the time, 3-4 years is pretty safe.
Oh, man, I bet that guy is just like.
No, this is what bugs me. He had a very peculiar personality. He decided he got a job like a year later because I followed up with him trying to help him get back in the market. And he got a job out of state. And he's like, oh man, it's such a good thing we didn't buy because now I got this job out of state. And I'm like, dude, do you realize what happened? I looked at the numbers. It was literally $100,000 more that he could have sold this property a year later had he bought it. So I don't care what he told me. Like that wasn't the right move. But
Yeah, you want to be right in that situation, right?
Yeah. But I can't just sit there and
What's that? Isn't there something like it's easier to convince someone that they were, you know, wrong or something?
yeah. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yeah.
So that-
So he was, no
good.
matter what you said, he was gonna be like, it was the best decision.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah, it's only happened once. For the most part, after the earnest money becomes non-refundable, it's pretty set in stone, but there's always a chance. That's why it's not guaranteed until they sign the closing documents and it has funded and recorded. Now, you're good.
It was a scary time
Nothing
for
can happen.
everyone.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Okay. All right, so let's talk about preparing an offer. These are a bunch of different things that you can do when you're preparing an offer for a buyer. So you've got a buyer, you're going out and showing properties. Now it's time they say, you know what, I love this house. I want to write an offer for this house. Okay, great. These are some things that we can do to make sure that we do it in the best way possible. So number one, ensure the property is still available. Here, depending on where your clients are looking online, and it's happened less lately, I will say, it used to happen a lot more back then, but often, sometimes your client will send you a property like, hey, I'm interested in this property, and it's already under contract, but they don't know that. There could be a couple reasons for that. Number one, the agent may not have updated the website yet. So it may still show as active, but really they went under contract yesterday. If I remember right, we have 24 hours, maybe it's 48 hours to update it before getting in trouble. So most of the time we're going to do that pretty soon. But there are websites out there that pull data less often. And so maybe, I mean, as a worst case scenario, maybe the agent didn't update it. So it's been under contract for 2 days now. The website doesn't update for 3 days. And so there's a chance that that property's been under contract for 5 days, but it's still showing somewhere as active for sale, right? That kind of stuff can happen, and it can be really frustrating, and it can lose you credibility if that keeps happening. So if you can, as much as possible, avoid that. But, you know, you don't want to say like what's natural for me is when a client texts me a property, hey, can we go see this? You know, the first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, let's do it, right? but hang on, don't respond to that text yet. Find out if that property is still available and then say, yeah, it sounds like the property is available. Can we go tonight or whatever?
So research,
Do a little bit of
Then-
research. And how do you do that research? What do you do?
go to the MLS.
There's two ways. Yeah. One is to go to the MLS, see what it says. Number two is on the MLS, you can find the agent's number and just text the agent, right? Again, with that, most often I'm not doing that for every property right now, because once you send in a scheduled, like a request for a scheduled showing, the listing agent will see that. And most listing agents, not all, most of them will say, hey, we did receive an offer today. The sellers are thinking of making a decision tonight. And so kind of giving you that window of like, hey, you've got to get in there quick to be able to see it. If your appointment is scheduled for 2 days from now and they've already got an offer, they may tell you, hey, we're probably under contract by then. So if there's any way you can go today, you should go, right? So those are kind of ways that you can find out, but yeah, you want to make sure it's still available. It's pretty obvious. Okay, then number 2, build rapport with the listing agent. Any ideas on what you can do there? Or why is that important, first of all? Does it matter to have the listing agent like you?
I like trust.
They have more.
Yeah, that's right. What'd you say, Corbin?
Saying if they have more, or if you run into them again.
Yeah. Do you think that's likely to happen?
Absolutely.
Yes.
100%. You guys know the 80-20 rule that can be
Yes.
applied in a million different ways. One of those ways is that 80% of the sales that happen are done by 20% of the agents, which means that you're going to run into those agents more often and you guys are going to become those agents, right? But yeah, I've run into the same agent multiple times over my career. And there's only been a handful, but there are a handful of ones that when I see come across my desk, I don't want to work with them. I had a bad experience with them before for whatever reason, right?
What's the bad, like disorganization or what is it?
No, not so much that, because even with disorganization, a lot of times you as the agent can kind of not be their agent on the other side, but you can help them know, hey, you got to turn in this document. Hey, we need this document. You know, so you can still help them stay on track, even if they're not completely there with it. I'm okay with that a little bit. What I'm not okay with is more of like clients being rude, clients being dishonest, or sorry, I say clients, I meant agents. Agents being rude or dishonest, and trying kind of shady tactics and things like that. That's happened a couple times, right? And the very high pressured type sales approach, yeah, doesn't work out very well. So I'm okay to step away from that. Now, it doesn't mean that if this is the house my client wants and that type of agent is listing, do I just completely steer them away from it? No, right? I'm not supposed to steer people away, but is that information that my client maybe find useful in the process?
Yes.
Yeah.
They might, right? Some of them may not care and be like, yeah, well, I love the house, so, you know, I want to get it. And that's okay. I'm okay to work with them if that's the case. But I at least want to let them know, because some of them are like, yeah, I do not want to work in that kind of situation. I'd rather just go look for another house. I don't love the house that much, you know? So kind of let your client choose. But if you've had a horrible experience like that, you can let them know. But yeah, you want to be kind and just be, you want to appear to be professional. It's so much easier to work with an agent that knows what they're doing on the other side. Like that's just the truth of it. And so if I can do a little bit of research, I don't want to be like negotiated hard against, but if I can tell that the other person is working together with me to help both their client and my client create a win-win for everybody, that's the kind of agent that I want to work with. Because in reality, I can be selling a house, but I can't sell it. I can't get a commission. And I can't help my seller sell the house unless what happens?
There's an agreement.
Unless, yeah, an agreement with the buyer, right? Unless we have a buyer that wants that house.
Yeah.
And most often, that's not somebody that I already know. That's why we have this system of agency, right? They're the ones looking. And so you've got to have, it takes two to make it work most of the time. And so, yeah, kind of go about it with that mentality that you want to work together. Too often agents are working against each other because they both want their client to win, right? I think we should have the mentality of we are working together to help both of our clients win.
Because they're ultimately the same client, right?
Yeah, like they both want the same result, right? They both want to sell or buy that house. So
Yeah.
no. Okay, so next, inquire about activity. I'm going to read through a few of these because some of these are kind of similar. So inquire about other offers on the property, status, why they fell through, Ask questions about seller motivations and needs. So as far as the inquire about activity, why would that be helpful for you as a buyer's agent to know how often they're showing the house and that kind of stuff?
See if you're in a rush, like.
Okay,
if
yeah.
You want the house.
Yeah.
If there's other offers.
Yeah, if there's no offers on the table, maybe have a little more time. What could you also do to this price, the offer price, if there's no other interest?
Possibly go
Yeah,
down.
I'll let that-
Yeah, more than likely you can go down. So with that said, is it in the seller's agent's best interest to answer that question truthfully if they don't have any interest?
Yes,
How come?
to answer the question truthfully,
Yeah, it was kind of a trick question, huh?
because
Yeah.
it's the truth.
They should tell you the truth. However, a lot of times they're not required to tell you
How
what
many-
has happened, right? So if they say something, it better be true, right? But not saying agents are liars. I'm not gonna go out there and
Agents
say
are the
that.
Most untrusted.
Yeah. No. But there have been times where I've questioned it a little bit, right? And you will see that once in a while. And so the best move for you is to, instead of, obviously don't say something that's a lie, but maybe withhold information. So in other words, in this case, if the buyers are asking me, what does the activity look like? That's a very vague question. So I can say something that might give them the impression that if they're gonna write an offer, they better make it a good one, kind of a thing. But I'm not gonna sit there and be like, yeah, we've got 6 offers on the table. You better decide by tonight, if I have nothing on the table,
Yeah.
right? Because what's gonna happen is I probably am gonna scare that buyer away. And now they're no longer interested and we still have no offers. And so then 3-4 days go by, then that buyer is like, wait, what the heck? Like, I thought they had multiple offers and they're still not under contract. So if they come back, the chances of them writing a good offer is way less, right? So like you can shoot yourself in the foot a little bit by being dishonest anyway. So don't be
It's
dishonest.
kind of like the art of what and what not to say.
Exactly, yeah. Now, most often, and this is another class that you'll have if you haven't already, it's a negotiating class. The person that wins negotiations is usually the person that says the least. So ask more questions, listen more, and you'll put yourself in a little bit better position. So yeah, I with all of that said, if you are able to get information like we have one offer on the table, it's not what the sellers wanted, and so they're gonna wait, or we have no interest at all, or maybe we do have 4 offers on the table. Like, can any of that information help you as an agent, buyer's agent?
Well, yeah,
Totally can.
heck yeah, because, yeah,
So I always ask those questions just to see what they will say. I'm not trying to get them in trouble. Sometimes their sellers will give them permission to say more than other agents will, or other sellers will. So I'll always ask those questions. I think it's totally fair to ask those questions. Just don't get offended if they aren't answered. That makes sense? Okay, the next one's similar. Inquire about other ask questions about sellers' motivations and needs. What kinds of information would be helpful for you as a buyer's agent? Or what, I guess, let me just ask, why would we care what the seller's motivations are if we're representing the buyer?
We can know the urgency of the situation, right?
Totally.
If it's a divorce or if it's, hey, I have to sell by this date,
Yep.
a lot of that factors into the timing of everything.
Yeah, so timing is huge, right? Knowing the seller's timeline is huge. Anything else?
Maybe they don't wanna sell unless they get a really good offer.
There you go. Yeah, maybe I have a client right now that's saying, if I don't get an offer for this amount, then I'm just gonna use it as a rental. So they're really in a situation where, yeah, they would prefer to sell it, but they're not gonna sell it for less than what they want. And so, yeah,
I think, I could be wrong, but you think that maybe also people are concerned with being homeless. You know, they sell the home for an awesome profit, but now they're.
but then they don't have a home that they're buying yet under contract. Yeah, that could totally happen. So there are a lot of different reasons why, but ultimately, what I think is the best like the best use of this is, as a buyer's agent, never write an offer unless you talk to the listing agent first. Just make that a rule, a habit, never have that offer. Because there may be a date where to the seller, they've got to close by June 31st. That's not a date, June 30th. Yeah, June 30th. That sounded weird when I said that. And maybe you wrote your offer to close on July 5th. So just 5 days. It's not gonna make a difference for your buyer really, but maybe for that seller, it make all the difference. Because if they close on July 5th, that's too late because they can't buy their other property because they have to close on that one before that, right? So there may be dates that you can be a little bit more flexible with at this point. Whereas if you wait 2-3 weeks, now you're under contract, everybody's got moving plans, they've got moving trucks scheduled, they've got moving guys coming or whatever. And they've got things set in stone that makes it harder for them at that point to change those dates. So you've got to want to make sure this happens before. I'll give you an example of one of my mistakes that I made early on that is like one of those, I always call them my learning experiences. I'm paying for my education, right? Because real estate school is not very expensive. So you got to pay for your education somewhere, right? I've paid it many times through my mistakes. And I make sure to literally pay for them because I remember them very much more that way, that I will never make that mistake again, right? So I was representing a seller and they were trying to sell this house because they found a house that they wanted to buy. It was in their same neighborhood. It kind of just popped up and they were like, man, that house is bigger. It's nicer. We want that house. We love our neighborhood. So we went under contract with that one as we're preparing to get their home listed for sale. And fortunately, we were able to get the seller to accept an offer contingent upon them selling their house, which is pretty rare, but it happened. So we were excited. We were under contract for the purchase. Now we got to get their home sold. So we get everything ready, the home sold, do a good job on the open house. The staging looks great. Everything's good. We get multiple offers their first weekend and we're able to go under contract. So everything's awesome, right? We're under contract. We're going to sell this house and then we're going to buy this other one. And the thing I did remember is we got to sell this house before this one, obviously, or else that's not going to work. They need the money to get the other one, right? So I did think about those dates at least. What I did not think about until about 2 weeks later was now I'm looking at the dates of possession. They have to move out of this house on a Wednesday. They cannot move into the next house until Saturday. So they have 3 days of all of their stuff having to go somewhere. So naturally, I'm like, oh, that should be no problem. I'm sure either the buyer will be willing to extend 3 days. That's no problem. Or maybe the seller will give us 3 days, close 3 days early or something and give us possession early. Well, that was a nice thought. But after talking to both sides, both of those sides, because again, this was 2 weeks into it, had already had their plans set in stone and neither of them were willing to budge. And so I'm like, oh, crap. Like,
Yeah.
this is really bad, right? Like, this is what like, what are they going to do for 3 days? Have their stuff in storage and they have to move twice. Like, yeah, it was
My
bad.
brother kills the house.
Yeah, which I have done that before. Oh man, that was another situation. I used my home as storage for somebody for a couple days. So I guess I had made this mistake before.
No way. That's another story.
Hey, you got it done.
Dang, I did it twice. This sucks.
Yeah.
Don't make this mistake.
So, okay, so wait.
So how I resolved it, because I tried to get both sides to budge and neither of them would. They had their reasons. And so I finally ended up just being like, you know what, I'm going to pay for your moving trucks. I'm going to have you pay for it for 3 days so that your stuff can be in a moving truck for 3 days. I paid for them to stay in a hotel for 3 days. And then I gave them a nice gift card to La Jolla Groves. Have you ever been there? Down in Provo, Riverwoods, really nice restaurant.
Dude,
Just to be like, look, I understand this is my mistake. I'm sorry. Like, I hope you don't lose trust. And what's interesting is when you fix a problem that you've made, you actually have an opportunity to build more rapport with them. Why do you think that is? Or do you not think that's true?
no, you go.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, absolutely, it does. It shows like that you're honest and that you made a mistake. You called yourself out, like, hey, I should know this should have been differently. So it gives you more credibility. with
Yeah.
them.
Yep. So anytime I make a mistake, which it's going to happen to all of us, I make sure to let them know, hey, this is what happened. This is what I did or what I didn't do. Here's what I'm going to do for the future to make sure that this never happens again to you or to anybody else, because I want them to know I'm a professional, I'm learning, and I've got this now built into my system as a reminder for me. But when I'm writing a contract, make sure I'm looking at the dates so that I don't line them up wrong.
Yeah.
But then here's what I'm going to do to fix the problem for you right now as much as I can. And when I did that for that, everybody's different. Some people still may not have appreciated that. These clients were very different. They were very kind and they were just like, wow, that is above and beyond. Thank you so much. Like, they were very grateful. I had no rapport lost with them because of this experience. I actually gained more, I feel like,
Yeah.
for them. So don't get discouraged if you do make a mistake. Own up to it. Because what I also hate is just for people to pass the blame to somebody else. oh, it's because they wouldn't be willing. So I can't believe they wouldn't be willing to do that or whatever. Just own it. Like I made that mistake. And even if I didn't, maybe I could have done something to prevent a mistake from happening. And I could have done it, even if it was someone else's fault. So own it and take that and move forward. But yeah.
I think human nature is to see somebody that if you have, we're all human, we make mistakes. And I think human nature is to see that person that's made a mistake and to say, okay, what are you going to do with this mistake?
Yeah.
Here is your opportunity to shine.
Yep.
Or you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, show us your true colors kind of
most
thing,
people-
right?
I hope most
Yeah.
people are like that.
Yeah, so obviously, like, don't go out there and purposely make mistakes so that you can have a chance to repair them, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's probably not good. Because if you make too many, you're unprofessional. But if something happens. Okay, so yeah, sellers' motivations can totally be key because if you know what they're wanting, you can maybe kind of tailor your offer to match exactly what they want. If it doesn't really matter to your client, like if they're, yeah, I don't care if I move on this day or that day, but it matters everything to the seller, put the day that the seller would want, right? Try and do as much as that as you can because you get a better chance of not only getting it to be accepted in the first place, but also to create that win-win to where you may have a little more negotiating power on something else that matters to your buyer because you were willing to do something that mattered to them, right? So you can't go wrong with that. So the only way to know those sellers' motivations are those on the MLS.
And to talk to the agent, yeah.
Sorry, I'm asking a question. Are the sellers' motivations on the MLS?
No.
No. So how do you find it? Yeah. Talking to the listing agent. You've got to have that conversation. Now, as a listing agent on my listings, I'll be honest, it's probably around 50% of the time when I receive an offer that I heard from that agent beforehand, or that I got a call from that agent beforehand to find out my seller's motivations. And 50 may even be being generous. But be that agent that always calls the listing agent, says, what matters to your seller? What can we do in our offer to make it a win for your sellers? Obviously everyone's going to say price, but there are so many other things that can be done to appeal to them.
You're saying that 50% you're getting contact with and abstracting that information. 50%.
No, I'm saying when I'm the listing agent, I'm probably only getting about half of the agents calling me beforehand.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, thanks for asking me to clarify.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's not a lot. And that may be being too much. It may be closer to a third of the time as an agent calls. So just be that agent that always calls. Because I do think that helps also build rapport, as one of the earlier points, with the listing agent.
Yeah,
So. Okay. Ask listing agent how they want to receive the offer. That doesn't really apply to our industry. Maybe in some states it does. There's only one.
Carrier pigeon, right?
There you go. Yeah, they want it delivered in the mail with a stamp. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. There are a couple times where I've had specific instructions, but I guess to that point in the MLS on the agent remarks, if they want you to deliver their offer to something other than sending it to their email, that's usually where they'll tell you. And definitely read those agent remarks, because if the agent remarks say, please, there's a couple of them that have websites that you're like, please go to this website to submit your offer. And they created like their own whatever website to receive offers. That's great. For example, Homey has that. If your buyer is interested in a Homey home that's being sold by Homey, then that's one of the ways that they receive offers through a website. But if you ignore that and you just send it to their email, either it might get lost, it may never get seen, or it's just frustrating for that agent. Like they didn't even read the instructions. I asked them to do it here, right? So that's an easy way to lose rapport if you are doing that. So just follow those instructions. But most of the time, offers are sent with a pre-approval letter and the offer to the agent. I also like to, in my email, give them a couple of the highlights of the offer. I'm not trying to, like, the agents aren't going to be dumb. If I'm like sneaking in a home warranty or something that they already told me they're not going to pay for, and I ignore that in my email, but it's in the offer, like they're going to find out, right? So if, for example, if I'm offering a price that's lower than what they're asking for, there's no point in hiding it. They're going to see it. So in my email, I kind of give them like the main points of the offer. Here's my price. Here's if there's something that matters to the seller, we're going to close by this day. We're going to give you 7 extra days of possession or whatever. Something that like, if I were the listing agent, these are the points that I want that buyer or that seller to really understand like, hey, this is what we're doing. So anyway, doesn't have to be long though, because they have the offer. Obtain the buyer's pre-approval letter from lender. We just mentioned that briefly, but yeah, don't ever send in an offer unless you have a pre-approval letter. In fact, this is another learning experience for me. Don't ever show homes, maybe one home, but don't ever show multiple homes to a buyer without having a pre-approval letter in hand. Any ideas why?
Waste of time.
Could be a huge waste of
Before they
time.
hatch.
Yeah. You want me to tell you another one of my mistakes? One of my other education tools that I've had to experience that you guys will never make this mistake on.
Yeah.
And it was actually to a cousin of mine, and we still to this day don't have like the same relationship that we had before. It's kind of awkward. There were other things that happened besides this, but so I had a cousin of mine that said, hey, I want to go see homes in the Draper area. And she has her own business. She was married and her husband worked. And then, I knew her business was successful. And so we went up to start seeing homes. She wanted to look at homes in the $600,000 range. This was 5 years ago almost. I was pretty new. So we started to see homes, and they're very picky, which is fine. Like, you're going to have those clients. And I was also a newer agent, so I didn't do a good job of helping ask right questions to help them narrow down their search before we actually started looking. So anyway, that was another learning experience there. But we were out looking for homes. We ended up seeing 20 homes up in the Salt Lake area, and finally found one that they were like, hey, this is the one we want to make an offer. I was like, all right, sweet. Okay, now that we have the home picked out, let's go have you talk to a lender. Let's get a pre-approval letter and do all that. Well, the first problem with that is that by the time they get the pre-approval letter, what might happen to that house? Maybe long gone, right? So that would be horrible. Luckily, that did not happen in this case. But when they did submit their stuff to the lender, any ideas what happened?
Was it approved that price?
Exactly. Their price they were approved for was $425.
Yeah.
Now, on the back end, some of the reasons for that was because even though her business was successful, she wrote everything off on her taxes. So she actually showed a loss. So in other words, she had no income
No, obviously, yeah.
to show.
Oh,
Yeah.
shoot.
So they only qualify for $425. Well, that was discouraging, but then we just kind of redid the search, set up new homes to see, and any ideas what they felt on every single home that we saw after that.
One.
Yeah, comparative.
Yeah.
It was
horrible.
awful.
So they ended up not buying for 2 years. And during that time, had they bought even one of those crappy homes that they didn't like, they could have sold it for close to the price that they were wanting, right? So like, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But that was a really bad, very vivid experience in my mind. You never know. Even though it appeared that she was successful, I had no reason to doubt that they made that much money. And I think that's why I was scared to bring it up earlier, is because I was like, well, yeah, I trust you. Like, I know you're successful. I don't want to make you think I'm doubting you. So you want to bring it up in a tactful way. To me, the best way is to just say, I'm sure you make that year, or I'm sure you qualify. But say something like, when we send in an offer, though, sellers aren't even going to look at any offers unless they have a pre-approval letter. So we've got to have this ready.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so it's not worth either of our time to go out and look for homes unless you have this in hand. But the other part to the reason for that is because I want to make sure you qualify for that before I start showing you homes, because it does you a disservice. Because yeah, every single home you're going to see is going to be disappointing after you've seen these awesome homes, So anyway.
Makes you that quote from Wolverine, trust but verify.
Yeah, there you go. Trust but verify. That's a good way to put it. So yeah, so get your homes. Now, there may be a time where you have a buyer that you don't know yet, or that you barely know, and they want to go see this house. Sometimes that's your best chance of having an appointment with them and like getting in touch with them and saying, okay, yeah, let's work together. I'm okay. My kind of general rule of thumb is I'm okay to show anybody one house, but I'm not going to go show you a second house unless you have a pre-approval letter. So my purpose of going to that, yeah, meet you, and then we talk about pre-approval letter. Oh yeah, I'm in talks with the lender. Awesome. Okay, well, when we have that, then we'll be ready to continue looking. If they press me really hard, depending on the situation, I might go show them homes. But for the most part, that's kind of a good rule to follow, is don't show homes unless they're pre-approved. So okay, sweet. Obtain buyer's pre-approval letter from the lender. Review MLS and tax records. You could go as far as like seeing what I don't know. I guess the only thing that I really do when I'm writing an offer is I'll have the MLS sheet open Because a lot of that stuff you're gonna copy from there. You gotta have the tax ID number, you've gotta have the address, you've gotta have the listing agent's information, you've gotta have like the inclusions and exclusions that they've put on there, right? You may change that a little bit depending on if your buyer wants the fridge and they said the fridge is not included, maybe you include that, but most of the information on there you'll get, including the seller's names. Sometimes at the bottom of the MLS, maybe you guys have seen this, right above where the agent's names are in the middle, there's a section that says owner, and it'll have their names there. If the agent did that, if they set up a listing that way. Sometimes though, that'll be blank, or it'll say owner of record, which is really dumb because all you have to go do is go up to the tax ID number, click on that. It'll bring up a new page and it'll have the owner's names right
Are
there.
you talking about this page?
Yes, but this is a buyer. Oh yeah. Yep. So right here, owner type, owner right here.
Yeah,
This one's left blank.
got it.
So that's where you find it. Yeah, good point. But I always like to, it's okay to put owner of record on your offer. If you didn't know that, like for seller name, you could just put owner of record. That's fine. It'll get corrected later in an addendum. But if the listing agent's already given you their names at that spot, then just copy and paste those names. Just use those names. If they didn't, you could also click on the tax ID number and just find the seller's names and put the seller's names on there. But either way, it's fine. Produce a comparative market analysis, a CMA, right?
Mhm.
Why would that be helpful if you're a buyer's agent? You're not selling the home.
Just to bring value
How?
through. Your. Through your CMA, I don't know, I mean, if it's the show.
But why would a buyer be interested in your CMA for that house?
Show them they're not getting ripped off.
Yeah, yeah. Or the opposite,
Yeah.
to show them, hey, we've got to send in an offer higher than what they're asking for, because and that is a strategy that a lot of agents use, which is great strategy. I use it. To list the home a little bit lower than what the market value is to generate more traction. So if your buyer really wants that house and they think that their offer is solid because they offered an offer at the list price, that may not be enough. Because what are other buyers out there seeing? You know, they feel the same way, right? Like they see other homes and they feel like, okay, this one's a really good deal. I'm going to offer a little more. So somebody's going to offer a little bit more. So it better be your client if they really want that house, right? But they only know that if you run a CMA, if you pull a CMA for them and let them know as the professional, hey, it is a great house. This is usually how I'll explain it to them. Is I can see after looking at the comparable homes in the neighborhood, what has sold nearby, that the seller's strategy is to put a lower price on there so they can generate a lot more traction. And so in other words, even if we give them a list price of, purchase price of what they listed it for, more than likely, they're going to want to see something a little bit higher, because that's what the market is telling us that this home should go for. So you kind of want to help teach your clients that the list price is just a market price. That doesn't mean that's what it's going to sell for. In fact, 99% of the time, it does not sell for exactly that amount. There's usually some alteration at some point during the contract.
You know this information based off the analysis that you've done on your end. So you're like, hey, I've done these comparables.
Yep.
So you can do that without even talking to anyone else. 'Cause
Yeah.
like, hey, this is what I'm seeing in the market.
Yeah, and I kind of phrase it to them like, if I were to sell this house today, this is what I would expect to get out of it. And so if it's 550, but they listed it for 525, then yeah, I would say let's put an offer at least for 550. That may seem weird because we're offering more than what they're asking for, but are they really asking for that? Not always. Some people see it that way. Some people see it as a market price to try and drive traction or traffic, and it totally works. So it's a very common strategy. Or like what Bryce was saying, maybe it is listed for 600,000, but after running the CMA, I don't think this home would sell for more than 550. So maybe, you can help your client save some money there, by offering a lower price, or they may decide to walk away because they're like, you know what? I don't want to be in a house where I feel like I'm way underneath the value right from the start. I wouldn't want to be, So yeah, doing a CMA. I don't do a CMA for every single house that we see. And that's why I don't do it until they say, I'm really interested in this house, let's write an offer. Then I'll run a CMA for them. But I will do it for every one of those. And I tell this to them in my buyer's consultation initially. I let them know ahead of time, hey, once you're interested in a property, I will run a CMA for you because I can, well, I have them answer, so that gets them more involved, but so that you know what the value is of the home.
Hey, Jordan, do you know if we have like, I don't know if we have it in our like KW training, but this like, or if we have ignites on
Mhm.
CMAs, like how to do an excellent.
I thought there was a CMA class, let me see. Nope, I don't see one with this. Could be partly in Win the Seller. I don't know. That's a good question. So there's a couple different sources. Once in a while, you'll see a class taught either by UCAR. Yeah, they do classes. Sometimes they'll have a CMA one. Sometimes we'll have a CMA person here. You can find some online. There's also, I got this myself because I just wanted to be really, really good at CMAs.
Yeah.
It's called the Pricing Strategy Advisor, PSA, which is like a separate sort of designation you can get as a real estate agent. I got that a few years ago. It was like, I don't know, $150, and it was like this whole other class.
It's a class you take.
Yeah. If
Quick
you do,
plug, registration is on the chat box for the Cloud CMA on August 31st.
oh, there's another class. Yeah.
Nice.
That one's, is that one free, Ritz?
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's August 31st. There's a cloud CMA class. That's probably a really good one to go to.
Where do I find that at? Just like on the KW site?
Where did you say that one was, Ritz?
Zoom chat box, but I'll place it on Ignite, WeChat as well, or what do you call that?
In the group-
WhatsApp.
Or WhatsApp, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
Thanks, man.
post it there. Oh. Okay. So my appointment for 11 just canceled, so I actually have a little more time, which is good because we're not gonna be done by 11 unless we skip it. So let's finish this slide and then I'll get like a 2-minute break for everybody, and then we'll do the rest. That sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, CMA, those are great. It's a very important skill for any agent to have, whether you're a listing agent or buyer's agent. But this is the time when it would be really helpful for a buyer's agent to help your client. All right, obtain a seller's disclosure statement and other documents needed. That usually in our market, in our area, doesn't happen until after you're under contract, is when you get the seller's disclosures. There's that first deadline that you choose is the seller's disclosure deadline. So the sellers have to give you those documents by that date and have you sign them. But sometimes they will have, the listing agent will already have those on the MLS under transaction documents. So you'd see that on the on file, but that's not very often, and it's not as important to have that before. But if they're there, you might as well look at them. Okay, any questions about how to prepare to write an offer? Okay. All right, let's take a 2-minute break real quick, and then we'll keep going on the next one.
Jordan, the open phone, I tried that app to do a second phone number, it was garbage.
Which one? Oh,
Open phone.
that's what it's called?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
really?
garbage.
Dang.
And so, in your experience, you said what Trillo is also not the best.
Twilio?
Twilio, thank you.
It just depends on how you try to use it. Like, it's a good service.
Yeah,
And so if you have reasons to use it for what it does, then I think it's great. And it's very inexpensive.
so like, what I want to use it for is for people to contact me through that phone number.
You can, because what happens, like I've had some clients that I know call me from my Twilio number, because when I answer, it'll say forwarding a call from Twilio or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll talk to the person.
Oh,
It takes an extra
cool.
couple seconds. So it totally works,
Yeah.
but they charge you for phone calls as well.
Uh-huh.
So probably for most often, you probably just want to use your regular number, but if you're doing like an ad or something like that, that you might want to put that
I'm just
Twilio
taking on
number.
to Daryl Life for my Arizona number. Is what it
Oh,
is.
I see.
wanted to change my Arizona number.
So you could, because it probably would be cheaper than.
Forever.
I've had it, yeah, for,
That's
50
hard to
years.
change.
Yeah.
That would suck, dude.
Yeah, I kept it here since I've been in Utah for 2.5 years, and it's been okay, but whenever I had listed that number and my office number, they would almost always call my office number because it was.
Gotcha. That makes sense. then yeah, I would, for your situation, that might make sense to do Twilio.
Yeah, cause I tried to, again, he said, open phone, it never worked.
Man.
Daniel's like, call me, and when it come up, and when it did, it came up like an error message, and I couldn't answer it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Dang, that's
Jordan,
good.
how's that house in Eagle Mountain doing?
Oh, that's
So,
not yet. Yeah, that's actually the one that I'm saying that she's gonna flip it to a rental. We have one buyer that might be interested, but they're not pre-approved yet.
yeah,
And so they're trying to get pre-approved, and if so, then they want it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they will. So, yeah, that's been my only listing I've ever had that is not sold.
I had a great conversation with the neighbor.
Oh, really? Nice.
Fantastic. I told her the guy came out and mowed the lawn for me.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
It was
that's
awesome.
awesome. It's a great neighborhood.
It is a really great neighborhood. The first time I went up to knock it, it rained, it was raining sideways in that neighborhood.
Oh, dang.
It was so bad. But what I did was I drove out, because I have my little Jeep, and I just drove out and. Jordan, are they just gonna build throughout the whole
Oh, yeah.
flipping desert?
Yeah,
Because
Eagle Mountain's gonna be nuts. And 20 years from now, it
all
won't
the
look anything the same.
structures, like the foundations
oh, yeah.
already being built, dude.
Yeah, it's growing like crazy, and there's a ton of jobs already there. I mean, Facebook, they have a data center there that has tons of jobs, and is it Google? I can't remember if it's Google or Amazon. One of those two has a huge like facility that has created a ton of jobs for people. Oh, Tyson is another one, the chicken, Tyson Meats.
Meats.
They have a huge facility out there too, so like there's a lot of jobs out in Eagle Mountain.
That's like
And
almost
it's
like a
growing.
Stouffer's or Tyson.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so let me just ask you real quick before we start. So are you investing as much of your, because I know you've been farming like here for 4 years, but.
Yeah.
Are you investing as much of your time in? Because that seems like a really tough.
Yeah, so one of the best pieces of advice that I got from Jeff Glover, if you guys have heard of him, he's a Keller Williams agent in Detroit. So one of the biggest mistakes agents will make with marketing is that they'll market to everything. So like, for example, just last week, I had a former client of mine who plays volleyball and asked if I would sponsor their thing. As an example, and then, you could get your stuff on a grocery cart, you could be the face there, and then you could also be on a billboard, you could be on a bus, you could pay for ads on, like, there's so many different ways you can go about it.
Yeah.
And he said one of the mistakes that agents will make is that they'll do sprinkle. They'll do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, and that just doesn't work. Because you're not gonna be the man or the woman agent in any of those areas.
Right.
And so this is I'm glad you brought it up, because like, again, I wasn't doing this on purpose at the start, but then once I started realizing what was happening, I've definitely made it more intentional now. But in that area, in that neighborhood, and that's actually how I met Sam, he's in that neighborhood. That's like, I've put a lot of my resources and time and energy into that neighborhood. And so it's a small
Vineyard.
community. Yeah, no, not even vineyard, just that townhome community.
Just the town.
In fact, there's a townhome community and there's a north side and the south side. So all I've done is the north side of that townhome community. So it's 230 homes.
Because,
right.
okay, so just Mike, we just 230.
Yeah, but
And then that's
because of
what you
that,
guys want.
Yeah,
yeah, look right next to it. But yeah, but because of that energy and focus, I mean, I've had a lot of, like, I don't need hundreds of deals in a year to be successful, right? I need, what is my goal? 20, 30, 40, depending on who you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's enough in that neighborhood that will help me get there,
And you're just doing you just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yep. Now I'm thinking about doing the same thing in a new neighborhood, right? Just kind of duplicating my farming efforts, but because it takes time to do it right. But again, that's why, that advice was like, don't just sprinkle a little bit everywhere. Like, figure out what is your passion.
Yeah.
Is it a geographic area? Maybe it's not a geographic thing. Maybe it's a what do they call it? Psychographic, where you have like similar interests in something and you
Yeah.
create groups or something online or whatever, where you have similar interests, and that's where you spend your farming time. I mean, there's just so many different ways to go about being successful in this business. It's just figuring out which one are you most passionate about, which one are you most likely to continue to do in 2 years from now. Because cold calling for a lot of people, yeah, you could do it for a little bit, but like, do you really want to do that forever? And some people do. I know agents that's all they ever do is cold calling. They love it. But if that's not you, then my advice would be to find whatever it is that's going to keep you going, because you can make money in any of those areas, because all it takes is knowing people. Anywhere you can go to get in good relationships with people is the place that you can, that you have potential to do really well.
Yeah, dude.
So try and get a little specific, and then pour your resources and time and energy, your social media posts, your money into advertising in that area, not going everywhere.
All right, can I just sub question?
Yeah.
I know like you're investing in farming and I know that that's like your little freaking.
One of my niche.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a niche right there. Are you and this is, well, are you investing anything into like Facebook ads or to let?
In that neighborhood, I would. I haven't yet, but I think that's really good. One I have done is, because my areas where I call them my 3 legs of
Yeah,
leads, like where I get business from is
Pillars.
one of them, yeah, 3 pillars. One of them is that farming neighborhood, but then I have friends and family and referrals. And so I try and do a lot of things to just help those areas, and events is one of them. I do a lot of events. And so what I'll do is there's a way to make a Facebook ad, and I just remembered that it stopped a couple months ago and I need to fix it, but there's a way to make a Facebook ad that only targets my friends and family, people that I know.
Mm.
And so it's kind of an ad that will show up on their feed, but I'm not spending that for all of Utah County, right? It's just my friends and family. So, yeah, that's where I've spent some ad money is on that.
Okay.
And it's pretty inexpensive. It's like $1 a day.
Yeah, I've been talking to a couple of people about helping me with that, because I'm
Yeah.
not good at that stuff. I excel in other things. That's not something.
It's not
that I'm
area.
proficient at.
Yeah.
I would rather pay somebody to help with that.
Sorry, one second. Josh Barrett, who taught the last class, I think, or maybe 2 classes ago.
Yeah, marketing on
Social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that I learned that targeted ad to the family one from. And in
Yeah.
fact, he has a video on on YouTube somewhere
Yeah, I
explaining how to
know,
do
I know,
that.
we're waiting. I've
Oh, there you
been
go.
in his classes. So.
Yeah, so you should reach out to him and just say, because he has a video that, I mean, that you could watch to do that, but.
Dude, that's rad. Yeah, I've been getting hit up. And I'm just on the side part. Somebody hit me up and said, hey, I will cold call for you for $10 an hour. I'll cold call. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, there's what is it called? Outside sales? No, inside sales. That's why. Inside sales department teams, like the Red Sign team has an inside sales group that's what they do, is they do cold calling. And so they'll set up appointments for the agents on the team.
Yeah,
Right.
this is like somebody that saw me on my fake color wounds.
Yeah, it could be. I just would be very careful, because you're gonna get hit up a lot from all sorts of different people.
Yeah, maybe avoid that.
Yeah, you might, but I get hit up a lot by different
But the
people that-
Facebook leads, or Facebook, marketing, ads, you're saying, maybe hit Josh up and see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think he'd be a good one to learn from. He does really well with that. All right, thank you guys for a quick break. All right, any ahas so far from this first half, more than half of our discussion, but
Don't count your eggs before they're hatched.
there you go. Take it to the end. You get paid 0, even if you take it all the way to the day before closing.
Just a emphasis on working with both sides. Like
Yeah.
everybody's a winner.
Make it a win-win, absolutely. Yep, it helps. Okay, sweet. All right, well, let's talk about actually writing the offer. These are a bunch of terms, and I think the purpose, what might be most helpful for you guys in this, and if it's not the case, then that's fine, we can switch it up, but writing just going through each of these, making sure all of us understand that these are the terms that you can negotiate in an offer and what these terms are. So the most obvious one is pricing. And when we call it terms, there's other terms. All of these are terms technically, but the pricing is obviously in most cases the number one deciding factor, right? But if someone were to say, I will buy your house for 500,000 and they were listing for 400,000, is that a guarantee that the seller will take that offer?
No.
Why not? That's a really good price.
Well, if it was me, if someone was willing to overpay that much, I'd be like, there has to be at least one other person willing to do that.
Okay,
So the market. maybe
Interesting.
The market isn't.
okay, yeah, so there may be more. What if the buyer's like, yeah, I'll pay that much, but yeah, I'll close in 2 years from now,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, that's dumb. Right, that's an extreme example, but like, or what if they say, but we need you to install a pool in the backyard before we do, or I don't know,
Yeah,
something crazy
yeah.
like that, right? Like, so I guess the point of me telling you this is that yes, price matters, but there are so many other things that can affect the overall offer that that's not the only thing. In fact, in some cases, price matters less than other terms. I recently had a seller that was buying a property that they were building, and it was a custom home. They absolutely were going to love that home. They had to sell this home first in Lehigh, and they were willing to drop that price significantly just to make sure that it closed before they were supposed to buy the settlement, right? So like that mattered way more to them closing on time than even $20,000, right? Or 30 or whatever it could have been.
That makes sense.
So you got to know your clients. And again, we talked about that as the buyer's agent, trying to find that information from the seller, because yeah, if you're able to change some things up that benefit your buyer, but also benefit them, then great. So seller's disclosure, again, that one just comes in. That's the first deadline that we put is the seller's disclosure deadline. And can you guys all picture, I don't know if you guys all seen a REPC, you have a REPC in mind, the real estate purchase contract on the
Yeah.
last page, page 7, where it talks about the 4 different
Yeah.
deadlines.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Corbin, you kind of picture that in your head? Sam, have you seen one?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay.
since I haven't worked
Yeah.
with that, yeah.
So there's the 4 deadlines that it has you put there. The least important, I think, is the seller's disclosure deadline. That is important, but that one's not that big a deal. There have been many times where those have been given after that deadline, and I mean, you should stay by the contract, but that's the one that probably is not that big a deal. But then there's the other 3 that we'll talk about in a minute. Conveyances, that's of like inclusions and exclusions, like what you'd said, Jake, earlier. Oftentimes on that sheet that you pulled out, the MLS form, it'll have inclusions or exclusions there, or sometimes in the remarks. So read through all that, but sometimes the seller's agent will tell you they're not taking the fridge is excluded, or the trampoline is excluded, whatever it could be a lot of things. Or there's certain things that are included on there that they are just giving away for free. And you want to make sure that you include whatever. My general thought is, I don't care what it is, if they're including it, I'm writing that in my offer as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Because even if my buyer doesn't want their washer and dryer, as soon as they move in, they can sell it and get $1,000 or something, right? Whatever. So if they're offering it for free, just include that. The ones that are up for negotiation are the ones that they either are having as excluded, or if there's nothing on there, or the item is not on there.
But you instilled, you like seared it in my brain. I was like maybe a month or so ago, it was a couple months back in June, 1st of June.
Mm.
You did a training and you talked about how important it is to pay attention to details on those items, because the difference between north and south,
Oh yeah, the sheds.
the sheds, could mean you buying a north or south shed. At a
Yeah.
freaking
To get to
bargain.
that, just to briefly explain that experience, I'm telling you guys, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, right? But hey, there's Josh. Yeah, to tell you about that experience, my client had said there was an old shed and there was a new shed. And they had told me that they wanted to keep the south shed. Well, when I put it on the MLS, I actually put the north shed was the one that they were gonna take. And so that one was included. Anyway, didn't find out till obviously after the sellers moved out. They took the shed they wanted, and then the buyer moved in and she got stuck with the crappy old shed, and she said, no, this isn't the shed that I wanted. This wasn't included, so I knew that was my mistake. I ended up buying her shed, which
Like a boss.
sucked. Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, that's part of the education, right? So, because what would happen? Technically, my sellers are the ones responsible for that. I'm not gonna make them pay for that. If I did, they're never gonna talk to me again. all about relationships, right? Like trying to keep them, and especially when it's my own mistake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be very careful with the exclusions and inclusions. Sometimes they'll say on the Rep C fridge, I have a deal right now that I don't know how it's gonna go down yet because I'm the listing agent. And she kind of mentioned that the buyer might want the fridge. On the listing, I did not say that the fridge is included, but when they wrote their offer in the exclusions part, which definitely don't do this, but she put, I don't remember how she phrased it, but she put, inclusions listed on MLS. That's super vague, whatever. I could even go change it today and say, whatever I have on there, I'm taking them off. But I think they're expecting the fridge, but they're not gonna get it. It's on the contract. My sellers are getting that. So, yeah, just be very specific on those kinds of items.
It's nice to have like my previous profession, if a mistake was that I was representing a client. I couldn't do things like, like fix it,
Gotcha.
and there's times where I made mistakes, like you said,
Mhm.
where I wanted to do that, like.
Yeah.
Right, by keeping a relationship.
Yeah, like this is your business, so you do
Yeah.
it how you want. And
Exactly.
I'm
which
not
is
saying
awesome.
just spend money like crazy because you gotta be careful.
Yeah, yeah,
Again,
yeah.
it's your business. You gotta earn a profit, but
But
there are
it's not
times
where I
for
did like $150 and made a difference.
Yeah.
But it would have been against my.
every
fiduciary
business
responsibility.
experience is losses,
You know, and I'm
right?
like, ah.
Yeah, like that to
I
me
can
is
fix this
just a loss.
one.
Well, hopefully you'll have more chances to do that than
Yeah.
here. Okay, any questions about inclusions and exclusions? Just be careful, right? On section 1.1 in the Rep C, there's a giant paragraph listing all of the stuff that normally comes with a home. So unless you specify otherwise, by default, this stuff comes with it. Ceiling fans, stoves, microwaves, if they're built in. There's a lot of stuff on there. So read through that. Okay, earnest money. What is earnest money?
Money you put down saying that you're serious.
Yep. Yeah, that you earnestly want to buy it, right? That's where it comes from. So it's almost like a deposit. There's two parts to earnest money that matter in a contract. Number one is the amount of earnest money. There's no set rule. You can put whatever you want. You could put $1. You could put $0. You could put $1 million of earnest money, whatever you want. But what is the norm? What is like what we normally put on there? What could be considered as not surprising on the other side?
Like a percentage?
Yeah, it's usually about 1%. So what you're saying? About 1 to 1.5% is usually considered like, okay, that's fine. Or I should say 1 to 2%, somewhere between that. So if it's a $500,000 house, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 of earnest money is probably okay.
Unexpected.
Yeah, that's what we expected. Sometimes even if you do the lower end, if you do the 1%, especially when you get higher amounts, like if you're doing $1 million property, $10,000 may not be enough. So kind of the higher you get, the higher the earnest money also should kind of get in terms of percentage. So that's one of them is that amount. Now, this also isn't a legal law, but this is kind of the norm. If is it possible for a seller to cancel after they're under contract? They can.
You cancel at any point.
Anyone can. It's a contract. It can be undone, right? But that doesn't mean there are not consequences for it, right? And this has also only happened once in my career where I was representing a seller who was under contract and then decided not to sell the home anymore. Buyer was not happy, but what happened was the seller returned the earnest money to the buyer and duplicated that amount and returned that money. So I don't remember the number. It was probably 5,000. So they gave the 5,000 back, and then she paid them an additional 5,000 as part of damages for the contract. Now the buyer could potentially sue for more if they want to go that far, but usually that's what happens is when the seller cancels, which is not very often, but they should be giving that money back. So it's also something good for them to consider. If they are like, no, we want them to pay $100,000 of earnest money. Well, you better be careful too, because if you decide to cancel, that's a lot of money you're gonna have to give them, right? Yeah, kind of crazy. So just be careful of that. The other part to where earnest money is really important is the deadline, or no, not the deadline. The deadline where it becomes non-refundable. You guys remember what we said at the beginning, what the norm is? When does the earnest money become non-refundable usually? So we have the settlement, the seller's disclosures deadline, the due diligence deadline, the financing and appraisal deadline, and the settlement deadline.
Wasn't that at the end of the month?
And a settlement?
Nope, before that. Usually financing and appraisal. That is kind of the deadline that when unless you specify otherwise in the contract, that's when it will become non-refundable.
At
The-
the financing appraisal.
Yep, at that deadline. So that means that your appraisal needs to be done and you've got to renegotiate that price before then, otherwise it could be at risk. There's ways to change, you can change it just like anything in the contract, you can change anything. There's ways to make it to where the due diligence deadline is the deadline that's when it becomes non-refundable. But if you think about it, that's kind of a lot of time. So if your standard contract is a week for seller's disclosures deadline, a week, 2 weeks for due diligence, 3 weeks for financing appraisal, and 4 weeks for settlement, that's 3 whole weeks the buyer could go, and then cancel the last second and say, sorry, we're pulling out. And there's no penalties for that. It's kind of a long time,
It is.
but that is the norm. And so, but if you have competition, this is where it gets good. If you have 2 offers on the table and you're representing a seller, you can probably tighten that deadline. You can say, okay, well, we don't want you to go 3 weeks for financing appraisal. We want you to do, or for earnest money to become non-refundable. We want you to have that non-refundable in a week or by tomorrow or 2 weeks. So you can kind of change some of that stuff. But that's a big one. Yeah. How long does a buyer have to deposit their earnest money?
The 3 days?
Not 3, but
Yeah.
close.
5.
You guys are very close. 4, there it is.
Yeah.
4 calendar days. So doesn't matter if it's a holiday, doesn't matter if it's a business day, it's 4 calendar days from the time the offer is accepted to deposit that.
You know, they put that way in the test. It was 4 business days.
Yes, they put that in the
You
test.
know that for sure.
If you forget, it's right there. It's right there in the rep sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that test. So like legit Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Yep. So that again can be changed, but that's hardly ever changed. That's usually
Okay.
what happens is 4 days. Okay, due diligence and inspection period. So usually 2 weeks is pretty normal, but depending on the situation, if you're representing a buyer that's going up against, this home is really popular and there's 4 or 5 other offers, you've got to do some things to make it more attractive to a seller in order for them to pick you. And one of those could be, hey, we're going to do due diligence in a week. That way, if we have any issues, we can resolve those right away instead of waiting 2 weeks to do that. Right. Now, when you get to that deadline, then you'll readdress what issues you want to cover, and they'll talk about that more in the negotiating class next time. Time for seller acceptance. What would be the norm there? So you're sending in an offer. Let's say it's right now. Let's say we're 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. You're sending in an offer for a buyer. What would be considered an acceptable or a normal acceptance deadline for the sellers to respond?
48 hours.
48 could be.
I thought 24 would be.
It's closer to 24. Usually, next day at 5 o'clock is like the most common thing you'll see.
Before business day closed.
Yep. Next business day at 5 o'clock. All right. No, I shouldn't even say next business day. It's usually next day. Even if you offer
Saturday.
maybe, okay. Maybe retract what I'm saying. If you're doing it Friday, Saturday is totally normal. If you're doing it on a Saturday, usually they'll ask for it on Monday. Sometimes Sunday is fine, but that is another one of those things where you should be asking the listing agent what would be acceptable to you. Because what happens if you send in an offer as a buyer and they pass that deadline at 5 o'clock, but then afterwards they say, you know what, but we do want that offer. Is there any way to get that property at that point?
Rewrite the offer.
You could rewrite the offer, but it's a lot of paperwork. There's an easier way. All they have to do is send in a counter offer, technically,
Oh, okay.
and you just sign a counter offer and boom,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
contract is valid again. Right? So that deadline is only if you want to accept this offer, how it is exactly like it is, you need to accept it by this deadline. But if you don't, or if you do after, just send us a counter offer.
The counter offer could be legitimately anything that's not exactly that.
Exactly. Yep. So all you could say is, and that's the thing about a counter offer is that the counter offer says everything you have previously stated in the offer is valid except for the following changes. So if there's nothing that's changing other than the deadline, the response deadline, that means everything they said before is still valid, right? So that's what the counter offer. So it's important, but it's also not that big of a deal if you go over that deadline.
Yeah.
But out of respect for both parties, I mean, you don't want a seller to sit on an offer for 2 weeks trying to decide if they want to take it or not. By then, the buyer's gonna be going somewhere else, right? So you wanna, yeah, usually next business day or next day at 5 o'clock is pretty typical. So you also don't, for that reason, I've had a couple of people try this strategy where they're like, I need you to sign this within 3 hours. That happened once and it did not turn out well. Or by tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So when they're putting those tight, to me, that's just pressure. That's unnecessary pressure because if the seller wanted to accept that after that time, they still could. And so you're just putting the pressure on them and just kind of giving them a bad taste by trying to use that tactic of, well, you gotta hurry and do it now within 2 hours, you know?
False urgency.
That's
Yeah.
somebody just being a pushy realtor.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe it's just their strategy, they're not familiar with it, but yeah, in most cases, that's not necessary. Yeah, you can have them, give them a little more time. Like, it's a big deal for both sides. This is a big deal. We're not selling shoes.
Dude, it's a huge deal.
No. Okay. All right, so that's time for seller acceptance. Financing terms. What might be, what could you, how do we say this? There's really two areas where they'll know, there's two key elements that the seller knows about your buyer's financing situation that really matter. Number one is the type of financing. So if it's a loan, which in most cases it will be, or it could be cash, right? If it's a loan, there's also different types of loans that some may be more attractive to a seller than others. Any ideas?
Other than cash.
So what are the different types of loans out there, the buckets of loans? There's
Like
FHA.
VA, conventional.
Yep, those are the three main ones, right? FHA, VA,
Private.
and conventional. There's also like USDA is another one. So why would a seller care where that money comes from?
Is one more dependable than the other?
Could be.
Right.
Sort of. I don't know if
Yeah.
dependable is the right word, but
Yeah.
yes, there are certain attractions. So an FHA loan and a VA loan, they follow the same guidelines. They may require, or they'll require like an additional inspector to go out to the property to inspect certain things. And some of it's as simple as like, if there's chipped paint, that needs to be painted over. If there's chipped, like if there's wood that's bare, so the paint is chipped off, then they'll have to go and like repaint that. If there's stairs of 3 or more and doesn't have a railing, it's required to have a railing. Those are things that have to be actually fixed before the house can be sold. In fact, the inspector has to go out, check for those things, and then the seller has to fix them, and then they have to send the inspector out again to verify that they've been fixed, and then you can close. So that could cause extra delays in the contract process, which is usually unattractive to a seller, right? But that doesn't happen too often. And so you just have to kind of, I don't know, I'm not saying don't ever accept an FHA offer. Those are, I mean, we're grateful for them because they allow a lot of buyers to get into properties that they probably couldn't be able to do, right? So it gives your sellers more options. But if you have the choice, if all else is the same in the contract, but one is conventional, one is FHA, 9 times out of 10, the buyer's going to go with, or the seller's going to go with the conventional. And if all things are the same and one is cash, one is conventional, they're going to go with cash, right? Sometimes cash can be less attractive because it's cash, they may close or they may offer a lower price,
Right.
but they also have no appraisal, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. So that's probably the single most attractive piece of cash offer is that there's no appraisal. So that price that they're telling you is the price that you're gonna get. And that it can close usually within 7 to 10 days. So that's way better than 30 for most people. So financing terms totally matter. And they'll see, and then also the amount of your down payment, that can matter too. In that first page, you give them in your offer, you put down what amount of down payment your buyer is offering. It's not like that, those numbers don't have to be guaranteed. So for example, I've had a couple clients say, oh, I don't have 50,000 for down payment. I've got 46,500 or whatever. Like, it's totally fine. Those numbers are going to change. This is just to give the seller a general idea of what you're planning for a down payment. Are you planning 200,000 or are you planning 10,000? You know, what range are we talking about? But that, they're not going to be held liable for that number. So. All right, buyer pre-approval letter, we already talked about that. You've got to send that in. Closing date, that's something that totally can be negotiated. We already talked about some of the reasons why. Home warranty, that I get that for every single buyer. I don't think there's been a seller before that has said, no, I'm not getting that offer because they're asking for a home warranty. There've been a couple times where they said, I like that offer, but I don't want to give a home warranty. And in those cases, okay, then we'll not ask for it. But for the most part, I ask for that in every single offer. Do you guys know any home warranty companies? You'll get to know them as you come to team meeting and stuff. They're here in the office pretty frequently. There's several that they're great. Silverback Home Warranty is one, Ibex, Elevated Home Warranty. Those are three of the most common ones that you'll see.
You said Silverback, I've been seeing Silverback a ton on my feed.
Yep. Silverback's one of them. They're all very similar in terms of their pricing and stuff. They're going to have their reasons for why one is better than the other. So you can get to know those. Your clients more than likely are not going to know what company to use. And so that's kind of a thing that you decide for your client in a way. And so that's why you'll get hit up a lot by home warranty people because they want your business. You're the one that kind of gives it to them. So, but any amounts on that one? What is a common amount for home warranty?
I don't know.
So you'd have to take a look at their plans to figure it out, but it's usually about $600 is pretty common, right? If someone's asking for $1,000 home warranty, then as a seller's agent, I'd be like, why are you wanting that? 650, even 700, I'd be like, oh, all right. But if it's like more than that, then maybe not. So that's a good one to know. Okay, repair limits. I've actually never used repair limits in a contract where at the beginning they're saying we're not going to ask for X unless it's a verbal thing. It's never like I'm doing one right now that verbally said we're not going to ask for any repairs, but it wasn't like in the contract. But then maybe there's a form, I guess, that we could fill out that says we're not going to ask for more than X amount. I don't know, but that's not a very common one. Unless you just waived all due diligence altogether, which is not recommended at all. You can maybe shorten the deadline to a day or two if you're wanting to get really extreme.
With the due diligence?
Yeah, but to waive it altogether, you're also waiving rights to like visit the property. You're waiving rights to do a lot of other stuff that you probably don't want your clients to waive the rights for. So, okay, and then the last one, addendums. What could you put in an addendum?
Additional earnestment.
Yeah, good. There's actually a spot for that in the Rep C. But that's actually, I've never used that before.
That's not it.
Yeah, not in Utah. I don't know why anyone would want to do that. But with the addendum, you can literally put anything. You can put anything in an addendum. The one thing to watch out for too is sometimes if your client is getting a loan, any ideas on what they don't want to have you see to see in the contract?
Your client does not want you to see. That
What, sorry, what the lender or the underwriter is not going to want to see in a contract. No, usually, because so if you think about it, the lender's giving you a loan or giving your buyer a loan for specifically for real property, right? You guys all took the class recently, right? So the real property includes the land, it's attached to the house. That's what you're getting a loan for. If they've got extra TVs, extra toys, extra, like maybe you're getting their ATV or their four-wheeler, yeah,
trampoline,
stuff like that. If you're including those in the contract, technically you could, but the lender may have an issue with that because they're like, we're not lending on those items. We're lending for the real property, right? So you'll see this a lot where there may be certain, like a few certain inclusions might be okay. Like the fridge is pretty, you know, they're not going to tell you no about the fridge or the washer and dryer. Like there's a handful of things that kind of make sense that go with the house. But if it's something like that, where it's like, you know, the four-wheelers or something extra that really doesn't belong with the house, but you want it, the seller wants to sell it to you, those are the items that they may say, we're not lending on that. So we don't want to see that in the contract. So there's a couple ways to get around it. One, there's a bill of sale that you can make, and then you just pay the seller cash. So that way it's still an official
And
document,
it's its own.
but it's its own contract in and of
Okay.
itself.
Right.
That's
You
probably the,
created those for your clients?
yeah,
Okay.
and there's a bill of sale document on the MLS that you can use.
Oh, cool, okay.
So you just fill it out.
You just say like, I'm paying X amount for the quads, this is what I'm paying for
Uh-huh.
the fridge or whatever, the trim, this is what I'm paying for the shed, this is.
Yep.
And then that's it.
Or you could do it in the contract as long as it specifies that you're paying for that in cash. So that the lender says, okay, yeah, we're giving you a loan for the real property. That's fine. If you want to buy that stuff, you're paying at closing X amount of dollars extra for in cash. The third way is to, I don't know if I want to say this, but I don't want to get in trouble. You could include it as, additional price on the property. Just don't include those items in that. And then kind of have a, I don't know, but you're not supposed to do that. So
Yeah, that'd be
I
a
don't know
little-
why I said that.
But I want to say with the bill of sale, since it is a separate document,
Yeah.
when would that cash be due? Do at closing or what do you?
Usually.
Okay.
Yeah, like writing a check to them at closing,
Okay.
that's pretty
Perfect.
common, yeah. But yeah, that's the stuff to write an offer, like, you can change a lot of that
It could
stuff
be like a studio in somebody's house, where they're like, dude,
Yeah.
I'll pay you.
for their
the
equipment.
Studio for all this gear.
Yes,
Leave it
hair
here.
salon, could be
Right,
stuff like that,
I'll send the bill, so we'll just have it separate.
yep. So just keep that in mind. The best practice is to really just talk to the lender and say, hey, they want this studio equipment. How would you recommend I put it in the contract? That's what I would do even today, is just ask the lender how they want to. Because they may say, based on this type of loan, they're not going to care, you can include that. Or they may say, yeah, let's not have that in the contract, so let's have you do that separate. So. Okay. All right, talk through the offer. So it's always good practice to just, after you fill out the rep C on the utahrealestate.com, and then before you upload it into your DocuSign, or if you use SkySlope or whatever, to just go through line by line, make sure that you are familiar with what you're putting in there, why you put it in there, what the amounts are for everything, and just double check everything. Because there is nothing more embarrassing than sending your offer to your client to review and to sign, and then have them come back and say, hey, why did you say this price? That's not what we agreed on. Or, something like that. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you want to avoid that. You want to be professional and make sure it's accurate.
Yeah.
Be sure your buyer understands the contract. You can say something like, this is a 7-page document. If you have any questions about any of these things, please give me a call. Let me know before signing, because I want to make sure that you understand before you sign. Just letting them know you don't want them to feel pressured by any means by doing that. Review details like price, closing date, inspection, contingencies, conveyances, that kind of stuff. You can just highlight that with them. Know what is essential in your area. I'd just say the pre-approval letter is really the only thing. Know standard or common terms for your offers in your area. We already talked about those. And avoid rookie agent mistakes. So hopefully some of these things I've shared with you are things that you will never make a mistake on. Check the dates, check the exclusions and inclusions, double check everything. All that.
I can avoid them, doesn't mean they're not gonna find me.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right, present the offer and receive and respond. Most of this we're going to glance over because we've kind of talked about both sides already. But we'll go through these quick. So double check when we're putting your seller hat on, you're representing a seller now, you're receiving offers, and now you're helping your seller understand what those offers are. Double check all the documents, follow the instructions. Maybe I'm thinking of this wrong. Oh, we're still buyer. Oh yeah, present the offer. This is presenting it to the seller. Sorry, I misunderstood. Double check all the documents, follow the instructions. We already talked about that, right? They may have you send it in a different format. Label all documents clearly. I usually just put last name of the buyer, so Thompson offer, and then a dash, and then the property address. That's usually what I put for my title for the document. Yeah. Then once we're under contract, I like to change that to buyer last name dot seller last name, and then the offer address, just so it's easy to find. But order documents logically. So once in a while, I've seen it where the addendum shows up as the first page and then the contract, right? Just, it's really easy to rearrange your documents to make sure that they're in order.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. Email is summary. I already talked about that. I'll highlight a few of the key points of the offer to make sure they don't understand, make sure they do understand. Notify the listing agent. This is a very important one. Once you email that to them, at the very bottom of my email on all of these, I'll always say, please confirm your receipt when you have a chance. Meaning, let me know you got this. Because there have been times where I've sent in something and had I not verified, they wouldn't have said it. So as soon as I send the email, I also send them a text and said, hey, just sent that to your email. Let me know if you don't see it. That way, one way or the other, they're going to confirm either by email or by text that they got it. That way I know. Add all documents to command. Do any of you guys use or are planning to use a TC transaction coordinator?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
100% recommend them. Best use of your money. It's very inexpensive.
That's
they do a
only
lot.
less paperwork for me. That
Yeah.
would had to get that.
Less paperwork. All right, I'm done. Yeah, very, very good use of yours, especially as a newer agent, because they're gonna help you avoid a lot of mistakes. And some of them may write offers for you, so you could have them help with that. Check with yours if you're not sure. And then consult with your buyer. Okay, now we're done presenting the offer to the seller. Then we just wait. I always tell my clients, my buyers, I will let you know the moment I hear back from them. That way, I mean, they can check in with me tomorrow if I haven't heard anything, but your buyers, just put yourself in your buyer's shoes. Like, you're excited for your commission, I get it, but they're excited for a house. Like, that's a much bigger deal than your one commission. And so they're on pins and needles a lot more than we are, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh man, I hope they like it. Oh, I wonder if they've seen it yet. So I like to try as much as I can to kind of, even if I haven't heard an update, to even just send them that text and say, hey, haven't heard anything yet from them. I'm hopefully hear back from them soon. As soon as I do, I'll let you know. Just kind of gives them that extra, like, I'm still here for you. I know you're stressed out about this and you're anxious to find out. I don't want you to feel like I'm just ghosting you for a whole day without giving you at least that update. So.
It feels like a lot of your approach, and maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like instead of like giving the pressure, you're relieving the pressure.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I totally see that as part of my job, because it can be a stressful process. It is. My wife and I are currently purchasing a property, and it's stressful. It reminds me how stressful it can be, you know? Yeah, like it's crazy. So you want to make sure that you kind of put yourself in their shoes a little bit. While at the same time, one of the reasons people hire us that they don't even realize is that we take the emotion out of it. So we are not as emotionally tied up in this situation as they are, and that's on purpose. Because when we're emotionally tied up into it, a lot of times you start making decisions that are not quite reasonable.
In the
And
best
so,
interest of all parties.
yeah, or even yourself sometimes, like you don't quite think through it thoroughly. And so that's what we're also here for, is to kind of help them make sure that they're on track. Give them that peace of mind, like, this is a great home. Give them that compliment. Like, you guys have selected an awesome home. Like, I hope you get it. You don't want to be disingenuous, but at the same time, give them confidence. People love hearing compliments about themselves. And when they're in a stressful situation like this, they need to be reassured that, like, you're making the right choice. You're buying real estate property. You almost can't go wrong in Utah. But okay. All right. Now we're talking about sellers. Now we're putting our seller hat on. Okay. When you receive an offer, there's a couple things that you want to do. Number one, make sure that the offer is complete. So make sure that there's initials everywhere they're supposed to be. There's signatures where they're supposed to be, that there's no blanks missing. Maybe they forgot to put in a price. Maybe they forgot to put in, check a box if they're getting financing or not. That's happened before. There's one that's pretty common to miss, is on the bottom of the first page. It asks, does the buyer need to sell a property in order to buy this house? Right? Is it contingent upon a purchase? And they're either check it is or it is not. And if that's not checked, you've got to double check on that. That's something you definitely want to make sure you know. And then confirm the receipt of the offer. Say thank you for sending. But again, I make sure the offer is complete before sending that confirmation text. Not a huge deal, but there's been a couple times where I'm like, yep, got the offer, thank you. And then later in the day, I'll pull it up and actually see what it is and realize, oh, it's actually the wrong document, or whatever. There's been a couple times where I've gotten the wrong offer. It's a different property address. And like, oh, that was for a different client. Sorry, let me send you the right one. Like, so just check on that. And it's just simple mistakes that we all will make when we're working with multiple people and multiple clients. Okay, get offered to seller in a timely manner. So let's say you get an offer. What are our rules? As the seller's agent, you receive this offer. Do you have to sell it, show it to your seller?
The offer, yeah.
Yeah. What if it's a really bad offer? What if it's like for half of the price?
Show them the offer.
Yeah, still supposed to show them. One thing that I've done for me to make it easier for me is I will, when I get a new listing client, I'll share a Google Drive with them, create a new folder, share that with them. I'll put the offer in that folder so that when I get an offer, they can access it there. Then I'm not like sending them every single document, but they can access it at any time.
You shoot a text like or a message like, hey, there's a new offer. Or...
Yeah, so and then I also have a separate spreadsheet that shows them what the offer is, and I can show you guys that in just a second. You'll want to do something similar, I think, to your clients, because to just send them a 7-page rep sheet that they may or may not have ever even seen in their life, like they won't know what all that means, you know. So I want to try and make it as simple as possible for them. So I have a spreadsheet that details what is this offer. And it'll help them easily compare that to maybe they got 2 offers. Well, I also have that compared to what I estimated they would get for their house at the beginning before we even listed their home for sale. And so that we can kind of see it all at a glance. So I'll show you that in a second. But that's how I do the offers, is just put it in a Google Drive, share them on that Google Drive, and then send them a text, say, hey, we did get an offer, or call them. I uploaded the details in the spreadsheet. Let me know what questions you have. We can talk about it tonight, or whatever. That's what I call my executive summary. I kind of do that all at once. Call the buyer's agent. You can, I don't know. The one thing I like to tell a buyer's agent is when we're planning to review the offer. So I don't want to ever speak for my seller and be like, thanks for sending this offer. Looking forward to accepting this, or they're going to accept it. They're totally going to go for that. Like, that's not our job. Our job is to be the voice and not to be the decision maker.
Even advising, right, isn't even.
We can advise
Okay.
our client, but yeah, so when I get the offer, I'll say, thanks for sending. We plan to review offers tonight at 10 o'clock. I should get back to you by tomorrow. You want to always give yourself a little more time. Even if I'm planning to review offers at 7 o'clock, I'll usually tell them the time after that. Just because what's going to happen at 10:01 if you don't send a text to that agent?
What's going on?
Yeah, they're gonna start stressing. So I don't want them to stress either. And I also don't want them bugging me all the time saying, where's my offer? What's going on? What's going on? Because that has happened where I've told them they got the offer on a Friday and I said, okay, sellers aren't reviewing till Monday. Just want to make sure you're aware, you know, whatever. Saturday comes around. Have they reviewed it yet? I already told you. Get a call, you know, Monday morning, like, yeah. So if you're, just make sure you're both on the same page on that. Okay, then call the lender. Okay, this is allowed in our area and I 100% agree with this. So when they send in their pre-approval letter, you've got the offer and you've got the pre-approval letter. 100% of the time, I will call if it's an offer that I think my sellers are going to accept, right? If it's a way low offer, I may not even bother. But if it's one that they're remotely considering, I will call that lender and I'm going to ask them a few key questions because I want to make sure that I do my homework. Because the reality is, it's really easy to manipulate or to create a fake pre-approval letter. It's just a document, right? And we get them all the time that it'd be easy to just change somebody's name, change this. So I want to verify with that lender that they know who this person is, that they've verified their income, they verified their job, that they're verified their credit. Like, do they have a house to sell? Where is their down payment coming from? That's a really good one for me, because sometimes they may not say that they have a house to sell, but their down payment is coming from this house that they happen to be selling. You know, like, I want to make sure we know that. That's really important. So I'll call their lender just to verify all of that information. And most of the time it checks out. Most of the time it's like, yep, they're solid. They're great. Everything's good to go. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's it. Once in a while though, I'll kind of get that vibe of like, they're not very strong of a buyer. They don't really have any extra money. So that'd be good to know. And then I can tell my sellers if I've called them. And then lastly, create an outline document to reference when you call the sellers. Yeah, that's the spreadsheet that I told you. I'll show you. Okay, I think that's it. Yes. You can do offers in Command. I have personally not, because Command was kind of created after I became an agent. So like, this is new technology. I use Command a lot. I just haven't used it for offers.
Yeah.
So this
well,
may be
I
something
have-
worth
I've
looking
used
into.
it once.
Have you, for
I-
offers?
Well, because, you guys have done your case studies yet? You have to zoom
Yeah.
through there, and it's not that bad.
Okay, cool.
You guys did it right.
I know, I've known.
I've done the first one.
You know, first one?
So this may be a better spot than the spreadsheet I'm going to show you to have your offers. It may be more user friendly, but you guys decide what's best for you. Okay, receive, review, and respond. We already talked about the 3 potential outcomes.
Can I go back in just 2 seconds?
Yeah.
What are you using, Command 4 toward?
So I've used it for my database, so I do the smart plans, so drip campaigns, to keep track of all my clients and, when I last talked to them and write notes on my conversations, all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
So that's
Right.
my CRM that I use.
right.
Mhm. And then I also use it to create ads. Like when I do a listing, I'll create ads sometimes. Or like that ad that I told you, I'm pretty sure I did it through Command. That I do it for family and friends.
Okay,
So Command has a lot of good stuff.
yeah,
You could use it for marketing. There's design, the designs tab. I also use my personal website. So I use the Command, the one that I get with Keller Williams,
that's. what
and
I
you
was
can
gonna
adjust,
ask.
make adjustments on there through Command. So I use most of Command's functionalities. The only ones I haven't really is the offer stuff and the process, forget what they call it, but where you're like sharing your process with your clients.
Mhm.
There's that thing, and it's new and it's cool.
Like, how
I
long
just
have we
have
had, sorry, how long have we had Command 4?
I mean, Command's been around for probably 4 or 5 years now, but they've been updating it a lot in the past like 2 years. So like 3 years ago, it was like not even worth using. It didn't do much, but now it does most of what any other CRM is going to do. And it's free. You don't pay for it, so it's a huge plus. Okay. All right, let's get a couple ahas and then I'll show you how I have this. You guys can do something similar.
It's like double check and then you cover yourself, because it's better to go through it twice than to
Yeah,
be paying a fine or have
totally.
something completely wrong.
Yeah, totally.
Either triple check it or better than being on your butt, so.
Yeah,
I also, took away as well. Staying tight with your agent, like keeping that communication open,
mhm.
because like you said, it's however many small percent of agents are
Yeah.
proactive and go above and beyond. It's not that many,
Mhm.
so you be that guy.
It's not hard to be a good real estate agent to your clients, right? You just got to do the stuff, and most agents don't. So it's almost a nice thing when that happens, because you're like, yeah, all I did was the normal stuff, and you felt like I went above and beyond,
Yeah,
Do you, reasons for perhaps not doing the bare minimum, if you will?
Mm.
Is it just time consuming to them? They don't
Could
see
be.
value in it?
Yep.
Yeah,
It's just carelessness. Could be, yeah, just that they're busy doing other things. They don't have their systems set up properly to where they're forgetting to do a simple task that means a lot to a buyer or seller, but maybe is not that critical for the situation, but it just would help them feel better. So having your own written checklist, I use Trello. I know you've seen
Yeah.
that. It's just, you can use whatever, you can use notes on your phone, whatever, but have some sort of a checklist to when the day that you meet your potential new buyer or seller to the day that they close and beyond, like you have items that you do for every single person to kind of help you duplicate that. And you just enhance it over time. You just get better and better, get better customer service. All that.
Trello.
That's what I use. Yeah, it's like $100 a year, something like that, 150 maybe. But yeah, it's just I like the organization of it. And
and visual. It's very visual.
yeah, it's visual.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Something that I've always appealed to me about sales is when you can be genuine and not have to create like false urgency or pressure sales. I've never been a fan of pressure sales.
yeah,
The idea is that, obviously, like you said, there's a lot of opportunity to back out, there's a lot of opportunity So you're not trying to slam together something real quick and be like, oh, I hope they get this through and, if they regret it tomorrow, oh, well.
Yep.
And so I've always, felt that that would be the case, and, through my training, I realized it's very much the case. It's very, we're hands-on, but it's not pressure, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just a natural urgency.
Yeah, you're creating urgency and alleviating pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, genuine urgency.
But I feel like, and Jordan, it's like, you're in the process of buying a home right now. It's urgent enough for you
Yeah.
probably, right?
Totally. Yeah, I have that urgency. Yeah, it just reminded me that it's not easy. It's not an emotionally easy process for
What are
anybody.
you guys buying?
We're buying in Eagle Mountain actually, so
Cool, man.
over by the Ridleys over there.
Dude, that's awesome.
Okay, so this is my offer sheet that I've created for myself and for my clients. I'll put the property address up here. I have this as the original estimate, so when I sit down with them to potentially help them sell their house, I will have this filled out, all of these boxes, except for the last one. I'm not gonna know what they owe till I'm there with them and then they tell me. But this will help do the math for me, so if we sell a house for 500,000, or if this is what we think we can get from it, if they have an HOA, let's say that they don't, property taxes, I'll look those up beforehand and put them in here. Let's just say it's 2,400. Title fees, same thing. I'll look those up beforehand, or I've put it right here, so it's easy for them to access and for me to access. Brokerage fees, I've already got it to where it's gonna calculate 6% commission. Seller paid concessions, right now, I'm telling people that to expect to pay at least $5,000 for seller paid concessions. And then home warranty, they should expect that. And then let's say that when I get to the house, they tell me they owe $250 on their home. So what this will do is this will tell them, okay, if you sell your home for 500,000, this is how much you're gonna walk away with.
Good visual, yeah.
Because this is gonna help them decide whether or not to sell in some cases. Sometimes it won't matter. They'll just take what they can get. But in some cases, this number means everything. They're like, that's 50 grand less than what we wanted. We're not gonna sell yet, or that's close. So there are some things that we can kind of change in here to make this better for them. Maybe we don't have the seller paid concessions or something, but I want them to be at least comfortable enough with this number that if they did get this as a worst case scenario, that they would still want to move forward in selling. Then when we get the offer, I'll put the offer up here and then I'll plug in the actual numbers. Let's say that it comes in at 505. And this is going to be the same. That already calculated that difference in commission. And let's say they're asking for just 2,500 of closing costs and a home warranty. They still owe 250 on their house. So then they can easily see, oh, this offer is getting me $7,000 more than what we were kind of initially hoping for, right? And then when we finally get to the settlement table, I'll pull in these numbers one last time. And because I overestimate on property taxes and I overestimate on title and escrow fees, I always want this number to show just a little bit more than what I got.
Yeah.
I want it to be close so that it can be real, but I always like it to be a little bit better. Right?
And this is something you created on your own.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, then this one's blacked out because it's not part of the estimate. But when we get an offer, these are the things that I look at the offer and I put them in here. What is the financing type? Is it cash? Is it conventional, FHA, VA, pre-approval verification? I just check this box if I've talked to their lender or not. Yes or no. And do they have a house to sell? Yes or no. How much is their earnest money? When does that become non-refundable? What is their amount, their percentage for their down payment? When are the seller's disclosures due, the due diligence period, the finance appraisal deadline, and the settlement deadline? This is when we're closing. That's why it's a little bit more bolded. And then possession, how long are they going to give you to leave the house after you close? 7 days, 24 hours, 0 time? And then inclusions, what are they asking for? Do they want the fridge and the trampoline or what? And then any other notes that I feel like may be helpful that I've learned from them, that might help them make a decision.
Is there times I'd imagine where people end up leaving things they weren't originally planning on
Yeah.
leaving, and that
Yeah,
just
it can
kinda-
happen. Because sometimes they plan to sell it and they can't get it sold and they're like,
Yeah.
I just don't want to, or they
So
just
you're
don't want to
getting
move the
on stuff,
fridge. Yeah. It's not super often and usually the things are pretty minimal, but
Yeah.
it can happen. Then if we get more than one offer, I just go like this, add another column and just write the other offer here, so they can compare side by side,
Nice.
one offer to another. At the top, I'll put a link to their sheet or to the actual offer. So they also can access it this way. That way that they have all the information here, but this is really what they're gonna care to see. They're not really gonna care to go through the offer page by page. And that's it. So, yeah, this has been really good for me because it's also helped me get better at my estimates too, as I've done this and I've studied these numbers and I've looked at them. Then I can get better at my estimates so that when I'm sitting down with them, I can be confident in saying, yeah, this is what you can get for this house. But- Cool. Okay, any last questions? 11:30, right on the dot.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Great.
No, thank you guys for coming.
I do have a question for these guys, actually, because you both with U Park?
I just joined, I have to do their classes or whatever
Okay.
to,
Like be official. For the application, I just got it back signed by Dean. Did you submit it to them straight? Like you email them or did? You remember?
With UConn?
Yeah.
Dude, honestly, I just like went over there and talked to them because they showed me how to use the lockbox and like kind of gave me a little training. They're really cool to work with. They're awesome. There's a couple of women that are in the front there, and that's how I did it. But yeah, initially I just emailed them.
Okay.
But then I just wanted to go.
I don't remember talking to Dean about it, honestly.
Because,
I
that has
got-
your broker, well, yeah, because has your, like, when you sign it, he has to sign it at some point, the application.
Have you paid for it yet?